It had been 20 years since Matt Hopper had set foot on Amity Island. There was nothing that he enjoyed more than sharks and water. He had dedicated his life to research. He had been born with the old silver spoon in his mouth and could have found himself just living off of the stock market and attending a few meetings. But, after he had been attacked by a shark as a young boy, he had found himself fascinated with the shark. He owned his own ship and financed everything with his own money. He was now a corporation that was known worldwide for his knowledge of sharks. It was quite by accident that he had found himself near the small island of Amity. Times were very different. His good friend Chief Martin Brody had died of a heart attack 2 years earlier. He had been up in Alaska and not able to attend his funeral. He knew that it was late, but he wanted to pay Martin's wife Ellen a visit. He had sent her a sympathy card, but had not heard from her in over a year. As Matt approached the small seaside village, he saw that things had not changed much. Not here in a myth. The homes looked the same and the homey atmosphere was the same. He knew that Martin's son Sean had taken over the job as police chief when his father had passed, and he thought that would be the first place that he would stop. Sean was sitting at his desk getting ready for the summer season once again. So far it had been peaceful there and he was hoping to have a good summer. When he saw Matt, he remembered him from when he was a young child. He got up and shook the hand of one of the men who had saved his small village from the deadly white shark that had attacked some of the people just a little over 20 years ago. As they shook hands, Matt noticed the picture of Martin Brody that hung on the wall. He remembered his friend and how, although he was clearly terrified of the water, the shark and the boat, he had truly saved his life that day. Quint, the poor man, had never stood a chance against the great white. He would never forget that time and hoped that no one else would, especially here on the island. Matt had something that he had to tell Sean. He had actually ended up on Amity Island by accident because he was tracing a great white shark once again. This one was a large and very dangerous one. It appeared to be even larger than the one that he had battled some 20 years in the past. Sean was truly happy to see Matt, but he saw the look on his face. "What brings you to Amity Island?" he asked him as he handed him a cup of hot coffee. Matt had no way to say the following easily, and so after he cleared his throat and took a long sip of coffee, he spoke. "I am tracking a large white shark. I am afraid that he is here or very near." "You have another problem, Sean." This was indeed the worst news that anyone could hand Sean that day. The last thing that the island needed was another shark. He thought of the time just a couple of years after the first attack when he and his brothers had found themselves being attacked by a great white. They had lost many friends that day and he had witnessed the death of his friend as she had been unable to climb back into the boat that he was on. He had sat there on the capsized boat and shivered and shook for a long time before he had gotten the courage to catch the rope and be pulled to the group. He had seen the shark. It had come within 10 feet of him. He had witnessed the poor man in the helicopter, as he was devoured by the shark. Sean shook his head and said, "Are you sure?" Matt looked at his friend and shook his head. "I am truly sorry. I wouldn't be here if it was not true." The weather was getting very warm and the swimmers were starting to go in the water. Sean knew that he had to something right away. "Can you take me out? Perhaps we can find the shark before anyone has to know." Matt looked at Sean and knew the problems that his father had faced with the town when he had tried to warn the people of the shark. He smiled at his friend and said, "Sure, we can go out. Sharks feed at night, so that is the best time to find it." Sean thanked the man and agreed to go with him that evening at 7. Matt looked at his watch. It was just after 3 and he thought that this would be a good time to visit with Ellen. He had his cell phone on him and if anyone on his ship needed him they could call him. But cell service was not the best here on the island, so he called over to the ship and gave them Ellen's number if he was needed. "Be advised, we will be going out tonight around 7 once again looking for that great white. The chief of police will be coming along with us," he told his men. When Ellen Brody had gotten the call from Matt Hooper, she had been surprised. She thought that he was up in Alaska or something. What could he be doing here at Amity Island again? "I hope it is not another shark," she prayed to herself. When Matt wailed up the familiar stairs, he was greeted by Ellen. The years had been good to her and she was indeed a pleasure to visit with. The house had a few changes, but looked mostly the same as the last time that he had been there. He remembered the little boy Sean and his brother Michael sitting at the television playing video games. He remembered him and Martin deciding to go to the pier and do an autopsy on the shark. Ellen remembered that day and hoped that such a thing was not going to happen again. "So what brings you here to Amity Island? I hope it's not one of those darn great whites," she said with a nervous laugh. But Matt did not return the laugh and she knew. She knew then that he was there because of another shark. She didn't want to hear about it. Then she did, she wasn't sure what she wanted. She took Matt's hand and said, "Be careful." Matt left and headed toward his ship. It was now 6:45, and as he turned around he saw Sean walking towards the ship. They were on their way to find another great white and save the seaside village of Amity.